Well, hi, everyone. I'm Bill Whittle, and welcome to PJTV. Well, it's 46 days until the election, and PJTV is going to take you to the home stretch with special campaign coverage every week until Election Day, at which point we'll go on a 2-week drinking bender or shoot ourselves in the head, depending on the outcome. Joining me on the set today is Stephen Kruiser, host of Cruiser Control, and the lovely and talented special appearance by radio show host Tammy Bruce. We'll be taking a look at Mitt Romney's no good, very bad week in just a moment. Plus, we'll be checking in on a couple of key Senate races later on in the show. But first, let's go to foreign policy expert Richard Grenell in New York for the latest on what's happening in the Middle East. Richard, good to see you. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me all the way. I'll be back on the left coast soon enough, though. We'll
be looking for you. Let's start off with this, Rick. Here's a clip of Governor Romney reacting to the events in Libya from last week.
America will not tolerate attacks against our citizens and against our embassies. We'll defend also our constitutional rights of speech and assembly and religion. I also believe the administration was wrong to stand by a statement sympathizing with those who had breached our embassy in Egypt instead of condemning their actions. It's never too early for the United States government to condemn attacks on Americans and to defend our values.
Well, Rick, you can see why this is a career-ending gaffe for Governor Romney, coming out in defense of the constitutional principles that he's presumably going to be sworn to uphold when he's inaugurated. So the mainstream media, many of those in the GOP establishment, have criticized Romney for his response to these uprisings. What do you make of the remarks? They seem pretty straightforward and kind of reassuring to me.
Yeah, actually, I was pretty excited. I thought this is a very aggressive move. I think defining 15 hours of silence from the White House is a phenomenal idea, and the campaign should do more of it. You know, the key phrase there for Governor Romney was, it's never too early to defend America. Who doesn't agree with that? I am astonished that the mainstream media, you had CBS's Jan Crawford, and you had Ari Shapiro from NPR conspiring, caught on tape conspiring right before the press conference that Governor Romney did, conspiring to figure out how do we trap him, and if he says this, we should do this. It's groupthink at its worst, and yet the media missed the real story, which is, where was the president? The 3 a.m. phone call is going on. He slept through it. He wasn't getting his intel briefings for weeks on end. And now all of a sudden, Hillary answers the 3 a.m. phone call. I don't understand where the media missed this. But from my perch here, I think what Romney did was right on. He waited 15 hours. Violence was developing. We ultimately had Americans killed. And the mainstream media jumped on him. I say, take it, move on, keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Well, the media, we've seen them basically bend over backwards to protect Obama for the last 3 years. But honestly, Rick, after these protests, it's like they reach down their throats and start pulling themselves inside out. They're doing the kind of contortions, the likes of which I didn't think we'd ever seen. How do these protests change the face of this election? Because isn't the key point here that Barack Obama's entire foreign policy was, if you'll simply elect me as president, the entire Arab world will love us because of the awesomeness of my transformational awesomeness. And when you have embassies on fire, you start to question whether this is actually a sound strategy for the United States.
Yeah, it's his whole idea that the dictators just haven't met me yet. They just haven't been able to sit down and talk to me yet. I think it's really outrageous that what we call the Arab Spring, a lot of the Islamists are calling the Islamist awakening. This is the time where, it's now 30 countries across the Middle East are rising up and saying, we too are Osama bin Laden. I think that if the media are going to focus on this film, this bad film that's made, in Los Angeles, in Southern California, I think that if we're going to design a whole narrative around the fact that this film is the reason that violence is developing in 30 countries, the media should also then recognize that the protesters are screaming about Osama bin Laden, they're screaming about drone attacks, and so we need to start looking at what President Obama's policies are doing in the Middle East, because we saw at the Democratic Convention a big, huge bumper sticker that said Osama bin Laden is dead, GM is alive, And then you see these protesters in the Middle East literally saying, hey, President Obama, we are Osama. So I think while we're spiking the football, or the better analogy is, well, the White House is parading around the country saying Osama bin Laden is dead, they're not realizing that the float is on fire. We've got to do something about having a stronger policy, and I think that's exactly why when Governor Romney stepped out and said it's never too early to defend America, it really was a shot at the weak Obama policies in the Middle East that just clearly are not working.
I think that's dead on, and I think that's why the media was doing such handsprings to defend him. Let's see if we can take a question from our viewer, Mark Landry, came to us on Twitter. He asks, is it safe to say that Jimmy Carter lost in 1980 not because of the economic issues, but because he failed in foreign policy? What do you think? I think it was both, frankly. I mean, you know, he had the economy and the malaise and all that other stuff. But, you know, the great moment for conservatives, right, is the moment where the hostages are being released on one side of the split-screen TV and Reagan's being inaugurated on the other. And then we're told that there's no correlation between these two events.
You know, I think the correlation is leadership. And you've got to understand that if you're the leader of the free world, you've got to have a credible threat. The Iranians saw Jimmy Carter, and they didn't think it was a credible threat. They quickly scrambled when Reagan was coming in because they saw this is somebody who is credibly threatening us. We have the exact same situation going on with President Obama. You look, you know, he's ignoring the Israelis. He's not wanting to have a meeting with him, with the Israeli leaders in New York. And then we also see just a plethora of weak policies, whether it's, you know, 3 vetoes at the UN on Syria, or the fact that when the Green Revolution in Tehran first came about, President Obama completely ignored the opposition, didn't help the Green movement. You see many stumbles when it comes to the Iran issue. And I think the guy from Twitter is exactly right. I think the Iranians, the Syrians, and others are seeing there is no credible threat from the Obama administration. And there would be with the Romney administration. So I'm hoping that the American voters can see this and will begin to have the same effect and voice that they did in 1980.
Well, why don't we just close with that, Rick, and we'll just refine that last comment for you there. You know, prior to the embassies burning, it was starting to look an awful lot like 1979 around here with a weak president and terrible economic numbers. And now we have the added benefit of looking at the Middle East on fire and embassies burning and stuff. This looks to me like it's just awful for Obama. Obama, one of the few areas where he managed to maintain some kind of lead over Romney in the polls was in his foreign policy. Do you think that the sight of all of the Middle East on fire is putting a stake through the heart of one of the last real assets that Obama had among undecided voters?
I sure hope so. I mean, it looks like the chickens are coming home to roost, as the saying goes. The one thing that we should really emphasize here is that the Osama bin Laden is dead narrative that the White House has been pushing is really their only success. You know, the other success that they keep touting are drones, which they really don't want to push too much because their base hates drones. But we've got, on the other side of the ledger, all of the broken promises from Obama when it comes to international issues. Gitmo is not closed. We have not led at the UN. You know, you just look at one issue on the Iran issue. The Obama team said that they would go to the UN and they would unite the world and that the world would follow us. Well, guess what? In that cowboy administration of the Bush administration, we were able to get 5 UN resolutions on Iran. You know, that hated administration, the Bush administration. This beloved administration, the Obama administration, has produced 1 resolution on Iran. Then you switch it to Syria. They've gotten 3 vetoes on Syria. We've only done 1 resolution on North Korea. We did multiple resolutions. It really, the facts will show when it comes to votes at the UN. Our allies and others just have not followed this Obama administration, and they act like they have united the world. But I hope that the American public and the American voters are seeing this, and they're realizing that President Obama has broken a lot of promises when it comes to national security and foreign policy issues, and we should get rid of them.
Well, Rick, thanks very much for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing you out here on the left coast when you get out in a couple of days.
Thanks, all.
All right, let's go to our all-star panel. Guys, let's just prep this one simple little question, right? There's this giant uprising in the Middle East. Our ambassador's murdered. All these embassies are on fire. The Obama administration wants to blame it on a film that's been on YouTube for a month or two and really just say it's all about this movie. You know what? The most furious I've ever been at this president prior to this last week was when he had that open mic moment with the Russians where he said, we'll sell out the missile defense thing, just kind of lay low for a while and don't give us any trouble so I can get reelected. But what President Obama did, I think, when they had that filmmaker brought in at midnight, surrounded by 12 sheriff deputies to answer some questions, voluntarily, of course. Isn't he really, Tammy, isn't the President of the United States basically saying to these 7th century savages who are murdering and burning embassies down, we'll give you the most precious thing we have. We'll give you our First Amendment if you'll just be quiet long enough for this election to get passed, and then I won't have to be so constrained by the voters.
Yeah, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, that obscenity of seeing that, whether he's a filmmaker or some bad guy, we might not want to invite the guy to dinner, right? But the First Amendment matters, especially when people don't want to hear what you have to say.
Precisely.
That's the point of it. We wouldn't need it if everybody was, riding their unicorns and were happy. It matters when people get upset. That's the entire point. It was a parading for the Middle East. Now we also have ads running in Pakistan. With Hillary and Obama, Hillary effectively apologizing. It is paid for with our tax dollars. As now in Pakistan, they're approaching our embassy and there's riots in the streets and they're trying to get into the embassy in Islamabad. So our answer has been, Obama's answer has been repeatedly that we sympathize with your point. This is why Romney's first response to the Egyptian dynamic of sympathizing with the rioters was right on. This administration clearly seems to have been sympathizing from the beginning. To this point is by legitimizing the notion that this is about a YouTube clip, will not admit the truth of the matter, presuming the world is in a benign state, and we've got a slaughtered ambassador in Libya, where only now are they finally able to admit that that was terrorism on the same day as all the rest of the terrorism was occurring.
Steve, just real quick, you're hot button on the culture. Do you think that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would have called Steven Spielberg if it was a $400 million movie about the life of Obama, of Muhammad rather, and said, hey man, you need to back off? And why aren't we hearing from Martin Scorsese, who drew all kinds of criticism for his Last Temptation of Christ? Why aren't we hearing from these people on the left who have always told us from the beginning, you have to tolerate this as the most precious right we have, while this guy's being taken away at midnight?
It was a gutsy call by the president to go after a bad YouTube filmmaker. But he did it exactly as Tammy said, in capitulation to the narrative that was coming from the other side. It's comforting to know that the administration and Hezbollah are on the same page right now because they've stepped up in this little game in the last week too. They want to be big players in this. So it was one of the more disturbing things I've ever seen. They're now having to back off of that, which they're trying to run an end around with the stupid Romney video clip. They're trying to, they're saying, all right, it was a terrorist attack, it's Al-Qaeda, it's the whole thing was a lie from the beginning. That is what we need to keep harping on and making sure people understand, the independent voter out.
One of them may just add quickly, the person who should be concerned about this, Catherine Bigelow and her Zero Dark 30. If a YouTube clip is going to do this to the Middle East, how can they justify a film about the killing of Osama bin Laden?
Yeah, we'll find
Let
out
Hollywood
about that.
ask that question.
Find out about that soon enough. But let's move on because, as Steve just mentioned, they're trying to distract from the entire situation in the Middle East by talking now about footage which was first released by liberal mag Mother Jones earlier this week. It has Romney on the defensive, especially over this comment.
47% of the people who will vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they are victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it. It's an entitlement, and the government should give it to them. And they will vote for this president no matter what.
I want to talk to Tammy about this because Tammy used to be on the left, and we've had many talks about how the left operates. And the left is basically saying, well, his campaign is over now that the truth has come out. But this is kind of the fundamental difference, in my view, of the left and the right. Conservatives say something in private, and then they say the same thing in public. far leftists say what they believe in private, the bitter clingers to their guns and religion, and then have to go convince the American people they meant just the opposite. Conservatives heard Mitt Romney saying 47% of the country is on the dole and is going to stay on the dole, and we went, yeah, we completely agree with Mitt Romney, and that's the problem.
Yeah, you know, and he has been saying this day in and day out. There's even on C-SPAN, there's a clip of him from October of last year in the primaries addressing a question about the 47% and the importance of moving everybody up and out of that dynamic. He also now speaking about his campaigns for the 100%. Look, there's been one side of the world, and it's the left, relies on divisions and making sure that those divisions don't talk to each other. And what Romney said in that clip specifically is absolutely true. It's part of the agenda process of having people in a way forced to vote for continued large government. The left knows that it wouldn't be able to persuade on the issues, so it has to in fact trap you. I've been equating the Democratic Party and those people in a poverty situation that Obama has pushed them into being the people of New Orleans, as Katrina was bearing down on them, and Katrina being Obama, effectively. And Romney, the Romney-Ryan plan, are for the people who got out of New Orleans, who thought there was no other choice and no other option, but not returning once they got out because they finally realized, yes, my life can be better.
That's right.
So this is about the left and issues of fear and hopelessness, ironically, considering what Obama's campaign was, and what Romney is offering, which frightens the left-wing leadership more than anything else.
Steve, you're all over Twitter. Is it time for Mitt Romney to call in his concession speech, 40 days ahead of the election? Should you just call it in and say, hey, congratulations on your win, Mr. President, or is this a tempest in a teapot?
Oh, woe is Mitt. Yes, this was an absolutely disastrous week because the people who weren't going to vote for him before are now super duper duper not going to vote for him. That's the only thing that this damaged. And then the conservatives who were kind of having a hard time warming up to Mitt just screamed hell yeah as loud as they could so that their neighbors heard it and ran to the door to find out what they could do to help Mitt Romney. That's what that did this week. This is not hurting him at all with the and as far as the independents go, people talk about the independent voters. Let's make the case right now. The Democrats spent 3 days in Charlotte doing absolutely nothing to woo an independent voter in America.
Right.
There was nothing in that.
Women, abortion,
there was
abortion,
nothing
abortion.
in there. They didn't even, not even a cursory glance over to the independents. They don't care about the independents at all. And there's a new poll out today, 68% of the people agree with what Romney said there. Yeah. So it's obviously it's resonating somewhere, and it's not resonating quite the way the mainstream media would have us believe.
It's the law of unintended consequences.
It may just be yet another of the endless string of backlashes to the shiny object distraction thing where they think, oh, he put a dog on his car, war on women, and it's all blowing up in their faces. Everybody knows it's a distraction. We asked our fans on our Facebook page if they thought Mitt's slip cost him the election. Sadly, 4% of you said yes, you can stick a fork in him, he's done. 4% think it's all over. 96%, you don't get these kind of numbers on any issue. 96% of you wanted to know where this Romney's been the whole time. It's just exactly what Stephen was saying just a moment ago, and Tammy. People want a conservative candidate to sound like a conservative candidate and defend these things.
Look, Bill Clinton
Speak the
was
truth,
saying,
yes.
Bill Clinton was liked because he also spoke the truth. If you look back at the first Democratic convention for him, he sounded like a conservative. He was talking about welfare reform. He was talking about moving people up out of poverty and away from government dependence. It is in the American DNA to not be dependent. That's why we went to war. That's what we fought for, to be left alone effectively.
Well, this week got off to a bad start for Romney because of this Politico story outlining the dysfunction in his campaign. So the question is the Romney camp in trouble, or is this just the press trying to make us think the election is over? I'd really like to go to this point because we see that the polls are heavily weighted. The polls are more heavily Democratic weighted than they were in the 2008 election. It's like the 2010 election never occurred. And I think people are more mad now than they were in 2010. So are things like, oh, well, this gaffe means end of the election. It's a problem on the campaign staff, Steve. Phone it in, Romney, it's all over. That actually kind of reeks of desperation, doesn't it, in a weird sort of way?
It is desperation, and it's voter suppression. They like to wail all day long about voter suppression. This is actual voter suppression. What they're freaked out by the turnout numbers in Wisconsin for the recall, the runoff election in Texas. They see these overwhelming numbers of Republicans showing up to vote in the kinds of elections that people don't usually go out to vote in. And that is what scares them right now. They're trying to get people to stay home. That's all this is about, plain and simple. They whine about voter suppression. They should know they're the ones that that do it best.
Just very quickly about this groundswell before we move on, Tammy, just happened to have a Chick-fil-A for lunch today, and it was an hour or a half hour
Yummy.
wait to get in.
Yeah.
Even the Chick-fil-A election, right? Don't you get the vibe that there is a huge suppressed kind of an energy just waiting? Because I know from the Tea Party events I do, people had a countdown clock, 3 years out. There's now 629 days, 14 hours, and 9 minutes before I can go vote this son of a bee out of office.
It was heartbreaking when there was like hundreds of days to go. What are we at now, 45? Look, the Tea Party, we might not go to rallies or riots or even GOP meetings. We go to elections.
That's right.
And that's the difference, is that the left thinks nothing's happening unless there's some violence in the street. The fact of the matter is Americans, I think, have decided, and look, what you're hearing about the Romney campaign is struggling, and it's he's trying to get back, and he's trying to get himself back up off the street. That's a battle for everyone's minds. It is suppression. That's exactly what it is. They want the base. This is now the attack on the average voter to give up. They want you or to not work as hard, or to not write that check, or to spread kind of the Eeyore mentality through Twitter. It's not working, and they don't know why, because of course they haven't been in touch with us. They've been detached. They're surrounded. It is, as Rick noted, groupthink. And they hear their own memes back at them, and they really have no idea who we are or what we're doing. But we're going to show them, I think, on November 6th.
I think you're absolutely right. Let's take another Twitter question from our viewers. Battle Swarm, what an awesome tag, wants to know, to what extent does the mainstream media see itself as an extension of Obama for America, and which outlets do you think are the worst? Well, the second half of that question is virtually impossible to answer. But really, Steve, it's not even, you can't even call them the mainstream media, ironically, anymore. This is the audiovisual department of the Democratic Party. Forget the Democratic Party. It's the audiovisual department of the MyBarackObama.com re-election campaign.
For a variety of reasons. They're so heavily invested in this president, they are freaking out at the prospect of him not being there in January. One of the reasons is print media alone is that the revenues are tanking. They've
1955 levels.
Yeah, they're horrible, and they're looking to be the next saved by Obama industry, and so that's one of the reasons they're freaked out. And plus, they went all in for him 4 years ago, and they know, because of the rise of social media in that small little time, because of what we've accomplished on Twitter and everywhere else in that small little time on disrupting the narratives that they try to establish, they know that they're going to get creamed if they don't have some backup in the White House come January. And they are it's Panic at the Disco time all over.
We did a Tea Party event in Phoenix, and just before the show we were talking about this, but you said something just on the way up before the taping today, Tammy, I thought was very interesting. Was you talked about how hard the left has to work.
It wasn't when I asked you for your Chick-fil-A?
No, that was later.
Oh, okay.
We supply free Chick-fil-A to everybody who we like in this restaurant. But you were basically saying that the left, because truth has a quality of illuminating darkness, and you can't put darkness into something, that it's actually exhausting for the left, isn't it, to have to constantly plug these rips in the curtain that's keeping the room dark, and you almost sounded a little sorry for them.
Well, it is, as I recall personally and what I saw on the left, but just the nature of it. The effort to just maintain the collective, the effort to maintain the lie, it is so fragile. You could spend 10 to 15 minutes with some facts, and you actually can change the minds of certain liberals. They'll get it, because what their indoctrination's been based on is so flimsy. The left knows this, leftist leadership knows this, and this is why when people are thinking, oh my God, we're being swamped by the media every single minute, it's because they can't let up. If there is a moment, one rip, one glance, it will be over. It's like glancing over at the man behind the curtain, and you find out who the wizard really is. They've got to keep it going 24/7. It's impossible. It exhausts them. This is why the left has no new ideas, because all of their energy is spent on maintaining the lie.
Repapering that wall.
Yeah.
Well, presidential race is getting all of the headlines, of course, but the race for control of Congress is also an important factor in this election, needless to say. Republicans need to pick up 4 seats in the Senate to gain control of Congress. Looks like we'll probably hang on to the House. Polls coming out of the convention show Democrats gaining the upper hand in close races like those in Massachusetts and Missouri. Now, Elizabeth Warren has been running neck and neck with Scott Brown, but she's taken the lead in recent weeks. Or is this just a convention bounce? We saw just, I think, earlier today that actually Scott's up by 5 now, or 6 or something. So how's it looking down ticket, did you think, just in a general term, Steve? You know, this Aiken thing. would it just rip the heart out of every Republican and conservative in the country if it turns out that we were able to repeal Obamacare, but for the fact that Aiken lost this race because he was such an egoist that after making this mind-bogglingly stupid remark, RNC is not giving him any money anymore. Every single conservative in the country is saying, drop out of the race. Is saying, no, I'm going to tough it out. What happens if that costs us the Senate and costs us the means to undo all of this damage?
Well, the Senate's always the most painful because it takes the longest to rectify. You can't get over little glitches like that like you can in the House 2 years later. And that will be just galling if that happens right now. It looks like there might be some trade-off races somewhere. Who knows? There was Tommy Thompson was looking good in Wisconsin. There's the new poll that came out with the D+11 sample, though, that you really can't pay that much attention to. And if Brown prevails there, that keeps that a little. I think it might be okay still, even with the Aiken faux pas. And there's always the one thing we can wrap our hearts around is Claire McCaskill is such a god-awful candidate. There's a chance he might still win. She is that horrible. Okay. She could fumble before that. She's as bad as he is. And so we can cross our fingers, or they can bring back the dead guy that won last time. He might win again.
We'll close with you, Tammy. Do you think that, we just talked about it a moment ago, do you think that there is really an underground river flowing here that's really going to surprise people on November? Everybody thinks the Tea Party's dead. You and I work with them enough to know that they are just working on getting out the votes. They're making phone calls. They're arranging rides. Do you think that there's a chance we could see just like a really shockingly good November? Yeah,
remember 2010. No one again wants to talk about it because it was overwhelming. For the first time, women voted a majority for Republicans. I mean, it was a remarkable changeover, a historic takeover of course, of the House. And they're also, you know, the Tea Party movement, the rallies you saw and such, were simply a sign of what I tell people, and I mentioned this also to Governor Palin, who at one point was wondering if it could be maintained. And I would say this to everyone here in the audience as well. The Tea Party movement has already occurred. The revolution's already occurred. It's a frame of mind.
That's right.
The grassroots, the middle America coming out to those events was the sign of a shift that had already occurred. And it's impossible to change. It would be like the British wondering, because they don't see rallies of the colonists, if the colonists really are that unhappy after all. I'd say don't go into the forest. Because it has occurred, the revolution has occurred. You don't need to be in the forest to be a revolutionary, and we'll show ourselves again on November 6th.
And wasn't the great thing about the early days of those Tea Party rallies just going out and seeing all these people that had never been to a political rally in their lives? They didn't know how to get the parking permits. They didn't know how to do anything, and they just learned.
They went there themselves. The rally wasn't necessary to convince them of anything.
Right, they were ready to go.
It was an organic thing that we all already understood, and for anyone who's dismissing the Tea Party, it's a big mistake.
There's one thing I'd like to add about the down ticket stuff right now. It's very important, especially in the blue states right now, to not abandon hope because you think that it's being ceded to Obama, too. Like California is an example right now. You got Elizabeth Emkin running against Dianne Feinstein right now. And what happens in these kind of states is they just presume, the Democrats just presume that Feinstein is going to win. And that can keep the turnout low. And you need to still stay motivated in blue states about the down ticket stuff and go out and vote.
Everything is possible.
And make them fight for and blow up their ammo depots in the rear. The largest group of registered Republicans on the face of planet Earth is Los Angeles County.
Yep.
Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have time for today, though. Thank you very much to our regular Stephen Kruiser and, of course, Tammy Bruce for coming in specially just to join us. You can find Tammy Bruce over at tammybruce.com. And Stephen can be found here on Cruiser Control every week. We'll be back next week with more election analysis. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and also on Twitter so your questions can be part of our panel. For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks very much for watching.